Hello and welcome back for this week's episode of the Activation Hour. I'm your host, Melissa D. White, and you're joining me for my season of unlearning. So far, we have unpacked so many topics from self-awareness and emotional intelligence to dispelling the imposter syndrome and even how to tackle being an executive coach in a troubling climate, just in terms of helping leaders navigate the pandemic and racial justice and social injustice issues. Well, I think this adds another layer to this cake here because I'm telling you, our guest for today has all of these things packaged as a life and executive coach, but with another perspective of international experience. My guest today is going to help us with our topic of how to live beyond borders. One thing I know for sure as we have gone through the pandemic, social distancing, sheltering in place, I've experienced even firsthand just how small the world really is, particularly through the use of the internet. Now, many of us have fumbled our way through how to shift to a virtual life, and some have pivoted with ease. But a life where you can adjust with business globally is one where you can expand mentally and financially in terms of your network. Today's guest, Coach Colin Thompson, he's a life coach living in China during this pandemic and the outbreak of COVID-19. He definitely has insights about racial harmony, given his global experience, also has insight in terms of overcoming life and developing strong confidence, because you'll need that to get through any of these things we're talking about. So today, I want to welcome our guest, Coach Colin Thompson, all the way from Shanghai, China. You tuned into the Activation Hour. Make sure you go ahead and share today's episode. You don't want to miss it. Coach Colin, welcome to the Activation Hour. How are you?
Hey, good evening. I should say good evening, Melissa. I'm doing great.
Wonderful. I'm so excited to have you here. When we were chatting right before bringing you on air, you said something that resonated with me. And I think before we can even tackle the topic of, life beyond borders, there's so many uncontrollable things going on in the world. And you said, hey, you have to handle it with patience. We had a little
Yes,
bit of a power issue, and you're like, patience.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So that I think that's a perfect way to approach any of this when we talk about so many uncontrollables in the world. A pandemic, racial uproar, unrest, civil unrest globally. I mean, there's always something, right?
Yeah, call it life. Just call it life. There's always something in life. Just call it life.
Mm, that's so good. It's called life. Yeah, let me tell my audience just a little bit more about you so they'll understand your background and frame a reference for what we'll talk about today in our conversation. Again, Coach Colin is the CEO of Oligay, his coaching and consulting agency. And I don't know much personally about the blockchain business, but I'm going to learn today from Coach Colin about how that has given him an opportunity to not only see the world, but serve people on a higher level. He's definitely going to get into some of his personal anecdotes and thoughts and experiences of racial harmony living in China and in the United States. And then you hear his story, how he actually started out in Canada, I believe, and shifted to China. So there's some global movement there that we want to hear about as well. Even a overcoming triumph. There's a lot of things in leading with patience. Understanding Coach Colin's background, growing up through ups and downs, ending up in China, but overcoming a hardship. I believe there was maybe some diagnoses or people that put obstacles in your way and said what you couldn't do and how you could still do it anyway. And being a life coach in any climate, particularly this one, it's challenging to serve your clients through a very special type of need. So I'm very excited to welcome to today's episode of Beyond Borders, Life and Business Abroad. Thank you so much, Coach Colin, for joining me today.
Yeah, Melissa, first of all, thank you for having a platform, because one of the things that people in my line of work want to do is we truly want to help people. And with coaching, it's typically one-on-one, somebody who is you're talking to in person or now via Zoom or some sort of video conferencing line. But a lot of times we want to help people, what I call in mass. And programs like yours allows us to, as you mentioned, put out some antidotes, put out some themes that help people get started to do something that helps them to improve their life. So thank you for having a platform. I'm very, very happy to be here. It's about a little after 6 a.m. here in Shanghai, and there's no better way to start a Saturday morning than trying to help people. And it's very easy to do with your platform. So thank you.
Oh, what an honor. I want to start your day this way with us. I'm very appreciative, but also your perspective on and how important this is. I love how you frame that, to help in mass. And truly, that's the goal. I think that may be a perfect shift for me when we talk about coaching. There's so many, I think, unclear things about coaching. People really don't understand coaching unless either A, you are one, or B, you have experienced it firsthand. So we do a
Right,
lot of educating about
right.
who we are and what is even the practice of coaching, even as far as especially here in the US, coaching being considered a professional practice. So tell us how you yourself educate or help people in mass. Tell us about your coaching platform and what you.
Okay. So can I ask you a question first?
Absolutely, you can.
Okay. So in your experience, how would you define life coaching?
I would define life coaching. The way I tell it to my clients is there something you've ever tried to do and you just couldn't do it by yourself? They say, yeah, actually, I have. I said, well, if you could have done it by yourself, you would have done it already.
Hmm,
So a
hmm.
coach is the one who calls the plays to help you get the ball down the field and achieve the goals. I'm not in the game playing for you. I'm just helping you call the plays.
Wow, that is very, very good. So let me show you mine. Because a
Okay.
lot of times when people ask me, what is life coaching?
Mhm.
Sometimes what they mean is, how is it different from counseling or therapy or consulting? I always give a little story, and the story goes into how I describe what I do. So, for example, somebody says, if I'm at a event or just talking, and I say, "Hey, I'm a coach, I'm a life coach," they say, "Well, actually, I say I'm a coach." I say, "You're a coach? What do you coach? What sport do you coach?" And I say, "The sport of life." They say, "Huh? What do you mean sport of life?" I
Mhm.
say, "Look, life is, we live a long time, hopefully. In your life, have you had things you tried to accomplish? Have you had improvements you tried to make in your life, but you've just not been able to do it, or you may not have know how to start?" And they'll say, typically people will say, "Yeah, there's something I wanted to do, but I have not been able to do it." And I say, as a coach, we
Mhm.
help you go from where you are right now to achieving your goal. And the beautiful thing is, we try to stay with you until you achieve it.
Mhm.
So almost exactly how you define coaching. I got into coaching in 2015, and it was a massive aha moment for me,
Mhm.
because I say my gift, I say the reason I'm here is really to inspire and motivate people. My passion in life is public speaking. My
Mhm.
passion in life is motivating, inspiring people. So I've been able to do that for a long time, and I'm not going to say it was a natural gift. I had to work on it. I had to really work on understanding how to inspire people. But as you know, Melissa, the challenge of inspiring people is, well, not the challenge, it's very easy to inspire and motivate people. Let's be honest. Say the right things, flip the right switch, people can be turned on.
Mhm.
The problem is, a few days, hours, weeks later, they may not be as motivated, and they may have to come back to you for more motivation. The bottom line is, they need that long term support. So when I started coaching, I learned that coaching is a piece that's missing, because a lot of people who came to me to be inspired and motivated, they'd come back 4 months later and say, "Colin, flip that switch again. Do it
Ah,
again. Give
yeah.
me your speech again. Fire me up again." And I would do that. And then 4 months later, they come back again. 4 months later, they come back again. And
Yes.
I couldn't figure out how to really keep them going, because, as you know, it's not my responsibility to keep them going, but I wanted to help them to go. But with coaching, right, especially with paid coaching, it is my responsibility to help them be accountable to themselves, but to keep going. So when I started coaching, I learned that That's the piece that's missing. And as you know, in coaching, we don't motivate, we don't inspire. Sometimes I can't help but to do that. But the bottom line is we help them to go from where they are now to how they can improve their life. And as you know, if you improve an individual's life, odds are their family's life improves also. Odds are their interaction with their friends improve also. So that was how I got in. It's very, very brief how I got into coaching.
So I love how you put that. And I didn't know you would bring that up today, but that's so true. The sustainability of that feeling, almost like that high of, okay, I'm motivated and I'm ready. And then they crash. And then it's like, okay, I'm ready. I need more motivation. Pump me up some more. And you're like, okay. And so when we talk about motivating people and you say, hey, it's not my job. And oftentimes people think, that coaching is some form of counseling or therapy, and we have to be very clear about just that emotional piece.
Right.
Hey, accomplishing goals is not always really sexy, and it doesn't feel good all the time. So for me to be the one to pump you up, it's going to be a little difficult because you may not like me sometimes.
Right.
So,
Right.
as a matter of fact, if there are moments that if you love me all the time, I'm not doing something right. Because
Absolutely.
I'm going to push you to a limit that, again, obviously you weren't able to cross that threshold on your own, right?
Yeah, it's really about keeping somebody accountable. And sometimes keeping somebody accountable is painful.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is. So you talked about how you got into coaching. So I want to work my way back through your timeline then, if I can.
Okay. Okay.
Tell us how you ended up in Shanghai as a
Oh,
coach.
okay. And I have a deeper story. I'll bring it up later of how I really got into coaching. I'll
Okay.
bring that up, but I'll go more into how I got to Shanghai.
Okay.
Um, Earlier, you said I ended up in China or in Shanghai. Actually, it was by design. As you mentioned, I came from Canada. I look, my family, actually, if I go back further, my family's Jamaican. So my parents immigrated from Jamaica to Canada. They wanted a better life. I have five older siblings who came out in Jamaica. I'm the youngest. I came out in Canada. In 1980, we moved to Louisville, Kentucky. So going from Toronto, Canada to Louisville, Kentucky was a major culture change. Let me just say a major culture change. But we made the transition. My father always tried to tell us to be a citizen of the world, especially being an immigrant to the U.S. For my family, the U.S. is their third country now. So understanding different cultures, I always grew up wanting to experience different cultures because inside my household, it was Jamaica. You walk outside, it's U.S. So I already had two cultures growing up. I always wanted to thrive for more. Luckily, I went to Howard University in Washington D.C. and
Okay.
we had a lot of culture there. I mean, we had a lot of African brothers and sisters. We had a lot of Caribbean brothers and sisters. We had a lot of South American brothers and sisters, and of course, a
Mhm.
lot of Americans. So you have a lot of culture. I really maintained that desire to live and work abroad. Luckily, in 2006, I graduated from Howard University again with a double MBA in e-business and supply chain management. And I joined this company. You may have heard of them called IBM.
Yeah.
And one of the criteria I had for IBM or any company that I worked with was having the opportunity to work abroad. It was very important for me to do that. All of my siblings at that time were married and had kids, so they couldn't pack up and leave. And one thing they told me is, Colin, while you're still single, live your dreams. So luckily, IBM didn't guarantee me, but they made it clear that it would be possible. And lo and behold, a year and a half after joining them, I took an assignment in Shenzhen, China, supporting our manufacturing site. So that's how I got to China. And
Okay.
I distinctly remember my older brother was driving me to the airport, and he said, "You're not coming back, are you?" And I said, because it was a 6 month assignment. And I said, brother, man, I am going to try hard not to come back. And the first day with my manager, he says, Colin, what's your goal for your 6 month project? I said, my goal is for you to offer me a full time job when my assignment's over. And he did that. And I've been here, it's been 12 years now. So I've been here for 4 minutes.
Wow. this
Yeah.
story is, it so makes my heart leap. And so I don't know if you know this about me. So I lived abroad for a while in Germany during college.
Mm,
And
mm,
so opposite to you, I said, okay, I'm going to do this semester. And this was still while I was an undergrad. And it is very eye opening. I love how you framed, okay, well, domestically, what that difference was like moving to Kentucky culturally. But for me, I mean, I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. So, yeah, yeah. And so culturally, and my parents were very intentional growing up. My mother, especially, about language and your vernacular and your sound, even the Southern drawl and diction. And she's like, no, I want you to be poised and positioned globally beyond here.
Right.
And she was so intentional about that. Even if it was a cruise where you got multiple stops, we didn't do like the touristy things. It's like, no, I want you to see how the people live. I want you to see
Right.
all sides of that. And so fast forwarding to my experience in Germany, which hearing your story, you set the intention, like, no, your brother knew, like, hey, you're not coming back. My mom was like, go, stay, don't come back. But I think that's so amazing when parents set a very clear intention, or just your community around you. And I lost Coach Colin, but we're going to keep going here because I know he'll be right back with me in a second, despite our connections between China and the US here. But in sharing that story, what's so powerful, the connection here, is how when you set out to go into the world, being open to the opportunities that come back to you. And I know everyone's not wired that way. So when we talk about the experiences of, living beyond borders, life and business abroad, like Coach Colin just said, um, life.
Oh,
So I was bringing my audience up to speed. I said, don't worry, guys. He'll be right back. He's used to this. He's a professional, so I'm not worried. But I was just drawing the parallels here. You started out in the beginning of our conversation about, when you coach somebody in life, like, hey, it affects everybody around them. So, you just kind of know that going out into the world, when you have these experiences that enrich your life, it flows over into business. It's like if you have an enhanced or enriched life, you're looking for those opportunities now. You're fulfilled
right.
in one area and it overflows into the other. So when we talk about doing life and business abroad, yeah, go for business, but don't miss out on the life part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're able to have a merging of your life and business, if you're able to find a way to remember what your passion was. A lot of times we forget what our passion was. We say, you know what, passion time's over. I'm an adult now. If you can remember what your passion was, say when you're in high school and college, maybe in your early 30s, whatever your passion was, and find a way to, first of all, ensure that it's still your passion, but find a way to make a living off of that. I think that is really where you start to, I would say, enhance your life. And again, as you enhance your life, you feel so good. You got to spread that magic with other people. So I think for me, coaching, training, being I guess you can say I say an inspiration to people, but I shouldn't say that because it sounds too egocentric. What I mean is just being somebody who people know can inspire them, can motivate them, can pick them up. I think have really made me feel positive about what I'm doing because hold on, it is about money.
Yeah.
And it's about money because we have to pay bills. But think about how beautiful it is to get paid helping people as opposed to, for me, getting paid to build software, which is good because now people have the apps and people love software. But imagine being able to get paid or make a living helping people directly and helping them to improve their life and inspiring them to get better. Because once people get better, they then help other people get better.
Mm, I love that. Number one, remember what your passion was. And number two, how to make a living from that passion. And money does matter. Let's talk about that. Because people they're scared to touch that. It's like, the money does matter. And it's not as, for my listeners, I have listeners all over, but for those particularly in the US, there's like this fear of, well, how much does it cost? That has to be expensive. And I think I learned that too, just from my time abroad. Like, hey, it's not quite what you think. I think it's just a matter of perspective on, money is simply currency. You're exchanging for a good service or product. but understanding your worth and what you bring to the market wherever you choose to serve. And it's okay to attach a price to that. And a lot of my coaching, a lot of my listeners, one of the main things they come to me struggling with is my price.
Right.
Oh, how do I set my price? Oh, I'm scared to charge that price. And it's like, okay, well, you have this big ambition here. You say you want to serve people at this level. Does that take resources? Yes. Does that take a team? Yes. Does that take maybe some proprietary things such as books, resources? Yes. Is that stuff free? No.
Right.
So
Right.
let's help people just have that conversation. They probably think, "Wow, I would love to live in Germany, Shanghai, Europe, wherever else in the world." And their money is
Right.
holding them back. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So there's two sides to the conversation. Now, as I would say, new coach, a younger coach, and almost inexperienced coach, you're always going to feel a little insecure about how much you charge. You're going to feel insecure about charging overall. And to a lot of coaches, I'm going to say, if you don't charge, then coaching is your hobby. It's
Mm,
not your career. Because
mhm,
if you're not getting paid from it, it's a hobby.
mhm.
Once you start getting paid, it does, then becomes a career. So the first conversation is, how do you build up the confidence to charge? As you said, every business has expenses. The second conversation, as you said, is maybe when you're talking to a client and a client asks you, what's your fee? And they say, oh, I can't afford that. One of the things we have to do is take the conversation away from what it costs and
Yes.
take the conversation to the potential possibilities of what you're going to gain. So I always like to really spend most time talking to young coaches or clients, talking about how will your life be different once you're able to achieve these things. As a young coach, once you have a consistent set of clients, once you're really running hard, as an individual client, once you've achieved your goal, say for example, you want to improve your business or you want to improve your relationship with your family. Once you've done that, how will you feel? Okay. And once they share with me how they feel, I say, okay, how will your family feel? Right? How
Mm.
will people feel? And how will your life be different? And during the conversation, we want them to feel that emotion.
Yeah.
When they feel the emotion, then the conversation is about, how would you put a price tag on that? What
Absolutely.
price tag would you put on that feeling? So we want them to understand it's not about what it costs, but it's about what you gain.
Mm.
And if you want to gain something, let's be real. If coaching for 6 months costs you $1,000, $2,000, but 1 year later you've achieved your dreams or your goals that you set with the coach, $1,000, $2,000 is nothing. It's
Right.
nothing because you can always make that again. But odds are, as you mentioned earlier with coaching, sometimes you have a goal that you haven't been able to achieve for years. So you finally achieve that. And I'm gonna tell you something, it's very contagious. Once you've achieved a long-standing goal, you spend a little time enjoying it before setting another goal.
Yeah.
So again, then you go for it and you have the confidence that you can achieve it because you just achieved a goal that's been on your plate for a long time. So when it comes to the money, I tell coaches, if you think you're charging too little, charge more, right?
Mm.
But of course, if you charge more, you must be able to help people. For clients, if you don't think you can afford, I say you can't afford not to, right? Because
Mhm.
you're going to be here again, again, and again. So I
Yes.
try to turn the conversation away from cost to what are you going to gain?
That's so good. What are you going to gain? I typically phrase that in, what are you willing to invest in you?
Mhm. And it is an investment, 100%. And I'll tell you, there's free coaching and there's paid coaching.
Uh-huh.
And typically, from a coach's perspective, the way we coach somebody pro bono or for fee doesn't change. We do the same things. But the difference is the client or the coachee. The client absolutely approaches it differently. So sometimes if you're doing what I call low cost or discount coaching,
Mm-hmm.
it's not the coach who changes, it's the client. Let's be honest.
Yes.
If I have a new pair of shoes and I pay, let's say, $30 for those shoes, man, I'm going to kick them off, throw them down. If I pay $300 for those shoes, I'm going to wipe those babies down every single day. And that's how people approach coaching, what they pay for. Sometimes you have to make that investment, as you said, to really be what? Invested in improving your life.
Yes, yes. And it's such a monumental shift. You
It
know, the
is.
way you describe that is the approach is adaptive. And I tell
Mm,
people, like, although, yes, have a system, absolutely. You want something that can be duplicated and that's scalable, but it has to be pliable. It
yes.
has to be pliable to who you're dealing with. So I want to shift the money talk because your background is in blockchain and crypto space. But also money is a very difficult conversation and a bit touchy for people right now because of the pandemic. And there are whether you're a coach that's listening, a speaker, and the speaking industry really has been hit. But for those who haven't been able to shift virtually, but people are struggling with just the fear of, well, I sure am having a hard time charging now. I feel bad because of people's predicaments, whether it's their businesses or what have you. But how do we address that in the situation of the pandemic?
Uh, I don't think you do.
Okay.
I'll tell you why I believe that. So I've been in China for a long time, and January, I believe January 22nd was when we first heard here in China about this thing called coronavirus.
Okay.
Back then, it wasn't COVID-19 yet; it was just still coronavirus, and we really had to adjust literally overnight to
Mhm.
this thing because we didn't know much about it. And in China, everything shut down.
Mhm.
And when you see a bustling city turn to a ghost town overnight, you sort of get a little bit concerned. Now, a
Mhm.
lot of my clients here in China reached out to me and said, Colin, right now I want to put a pause in coaching because my priority is not there right now. I myself felt the same way. My first priority was taking care of my wife and little baby. My son was 5 months old at the time,
Mhm.
so I had to make sure that we had news about what's going on, information, and how to keep ourselves safe. I was not thinking about coaching, right? I was very distracted by COVID.
Right.
Now, about 2 weeks later, a lot of my clients contacted me again and said, Colin, we've been living under the regulations for a few weeks, which means we're at home now. Our home now is the gym, the beauty shop, the playground, the movie theater, the
Mhm.
workspace, and people having trouble being inside all day with their family. People having trouble being productive inside their house. People having trouble hearing every day how many more people are infected and how many more people have died. People going a little stir crazy. So they wanted what they call COVID coaching, right? Coaching during the COVID time on how to deal with this.
Okay.
What I learned after doing what I call COVID coaching for a few weeks is we're not coaching on COVID. This is why I said I don't think you should coach on COVID because we're coaching on life. So I'll take you an example. If you and your spouse had a challenge or an issue during COVID times, and you're not able to really communicate, and there's a really uh, uh, intense atmosphere in the house, odds are that was there before COVID.
Right.
If you're not able to really focus and get work done, odds are that's been there before COVID. So COVID didn't bring out anything new. It magnified things that were already cracked. So I had to learn and say, you know what? We're not coaching during COVID times. We're coaching about life.
Mm.
If you're concerned about your job, odds are again, now your job may have been more impacted during COVID, but odds are it may have been shaky before also. So one thing I try to say is, guys, let's get out of the mindset of COVID or coronavirus. Let's get out of that mindset. Let's say right now is the best time. Now, perhaps it's not, Melissa. Okay, perhaps it's not. But right now is the best time for you to say, what really is my purpose? What purpose do I have right now?
Mm.
And what do I want to do?
Yeah.
Because stop listening. Everybody now have been in COVID for months and months and months. So you know how to deal with it. You know how to navigate life right now. What is your purpose right now? And what can you do to really start living that life more by design? Because people say, you know what, this COVID had made me really think about my life. Well, okay, okay. I'm not going to speak on that, but okay. But now that you are thinking about it, what are you going to do when you look back 6 months from now? When you look back 6 months from now, what are you going to say you've gained during this time? You
Yeah.
mentioned people pivoting. There is so much education online right now. There are so many opportunities to learn new skills, to do new things, to connect with your family and friends. Hello, I've had more Zoom meetings with old college mates, old fraternity brothers than I can count. And I tell you, we didn't do this before COVID. So people are really, really connecting a whole lot more. So there are so many things that can be done during COVID.
That's so true. You know, Coach Colin, when reflecting on that, even for myself personally, and my audience listeners, if you've been listening this season, then you know how I've been dealing with life during COVID. Season two is a result of sheltering in place. I put the podcast down, and I realized I had to unlearn what I thought my voice was and my place
Mm.
was. And going back to what you said about helping in mass, I realized like I'm really supposed to shift and help in mass. I love that. I'm gonna continue to give you credit and borrow that. And so my way of doing that, and little, I mean, as a speaker, and primarily, you know, my income came from traveling and speaking and training in person, that I said, you know what? I have a microphone and I have Wi-Fi. And the one thing I know how to do is talk.
Let's talk.
And I'm just gonna, and I had to say, okay, well, how do okay, I have a platform, pick it back up. So it was a season of picking back up the passion, as you said it, and talking through my own thing. And we patience. You said that during our conversation today. Patience with myself. Of I was frustrated. I couldn't figure out. Some people, it's like this fight or flight, and
Right.
for me, it was it wasn't flight. I sure didn't run from whatever fears I was having. I ran into work. Like I went into overdrive. Like it was like, hey, you know what? God forbid, I sure don't want to succumb to COVID. I don't speak that over myself, but let me hurry up and get some things done on
Right.
this list while the world is looking crazy. And so I think it's really important not to condemn people for whatever way that they're managing or trying to navigate through this season. But doing so, I love what you said. You help them shift the focus. It's like, okay, well, this is how you're struggling with it. That's cool. But let's talk about what you want to accomplish out of it or through it. And now, no, there's no better time than now while you are sitting in place. And I think even as the world is starting to open up a bit, I don't know what you're seeing there in Shanghai, and please share. There's a lot of, you know, unease and nervousness. It's like, okay, now that we've been told about this scary virus, you want me to go back to work? You want me to send
Right.
my children back to school? What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's very interesting because back in January, early February, when the coronavirus hit here in China, a
Mhm.
lot of friends and family called me or emailed me, what is this coronavirus thing? What's going on?
Mhm.
And get the F out of China, right? Because this is when,
Get home
you
right
know,
now.
right, right. This is when it was like really, really hot here, and the whole world was looking at China and saying, what's going on in China? And then you saw it go over to Europe, and
Mhm.
then you saw it start to spread to other parts of the world. And I'll say in China, the in the US, now from what I understand, that the coronavirus has become political as far as how you deal with it. In China, there is no political, right? So
Mhm.
if the government says wear a mask and stay inside, everybody stays inside. Everybody wears a mask. There's no question about that. And I
Mhm.
think that's what helped us to get past it. Right now, we are mask free. The only place you have to wear masks is maybe in a bank or things like that. But we're back to our daily routine for a few months now. There are very few cases of coronavirus, according to what the government says here in
Mhm.
China. So here, we've been able to get past it. But I do coach a lot of people who are in the US, and I'm happy to say that they got a double whammy, right? They had the what I call the emotional or the physical issue with the coronavirus. Then a lot of people had the emotional with the sort of racial injustice things taking place in the US. So they had a double whammy. And this is people of all races. And through coaching, we've had to really help them to really, again, look at these things as one chapter in their life. and
Mm-hmm.
not focus on what's taking place. I like to ask a lot of people, I say, do you work harder on your job or on yourself? And in most cases, people say they work harder at their job. And I say, come on, guys, you're with yourself for your entire life. Okay. You should be working harder on yourself, improving your life than on your job. And
Yeah.
what that does, it distracts them from worrying about COVID. Because let me tell you something. If you can excel during COVID time, what does that mean? It means you can excel during any time.
Mm-hmm.
If you can excel and make it in spite of discrimination, then that means you can make it no matter what. So this is a time for people to really, really dig in deep, dig in deep, put more effort, work hard on themselves, and they will see how their life just like thrive through this time.
He said, if you can excel through this time, you can excel through anything. So I'm going to take a quick
Absolutely.
break, but we're going to come back because we're going to talk about an area where you excelled, even in your educational journey. You have a story behind your background that you went from taking special education classes to providing the commencement speech.
Yes, ma'am.
So there's definitely an overcomer story in that. I want to come back and talk about that more so that people can learn a lesson on how you've carried that through all the way to this point today. Guys, don't go anywhere. We're just going to take a really brief break, and we're joined with Coach Colin Thompson, all the way from Shanghai, who started his day with us here on the Activation Hour. We'll be right back in just a moment. So, we have been unpacking this conversation here about life in business and living abroad, but there's so many spectrums to this conversation. It's definitely not one sided at all. We're just having a conversation about life,
Right.
especially during the pandemic. Life as coaches, how to help people navigate through this climate. And it's not without overcoming adversity. And you have an overcomer story. Tell us about your childhood, your overcoming special education classes to give a commencement speech. Tell us more.
Yeah, and I'm writing a note here because I want to make sure I mention something because I love telling this story because I overcame. It's funny we talk about overcoming adversity. I think in a way I just gave into it, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. So
Mm-hmm.
when I moved from Canada to Kentucky, one thing you have to remember: my family is Jamaican. I mean, real Jamaican. So my parents had the hardcore Jamaican accent coming from Canada, and I grew up in Canada, so I had a little, I don't know, I wouldn't say Jamaican accent, but I had a Canadian accent.
Mm-hmm.
So you go from Jamaica, Canada to Kentucky, speaking like that, they look at you strange. This is the early 80s. They didn't know what Jamaicans were. They're like, why y'all talk so funny? So in my elementary school, I also had a lisp. And one of the challenges I experienced going from Canada, which is a very diverse country, that I think at the time was much more open than the US. When I moved to the US, things were different because I felt black there, meaning there were certain places you couldn't go, there's certain things you couldn't do, and I felt that. So that's the first time I ever felt discrimination and whatnot. So for a small kid, that's very heavy. So I also developed a stutter. So now I have a lisp and a stutter. And, my parents come to school talking to the administrators, and they can't understand my parents. So they put me in a special class for English. And not English as far as nouns and verbs, but English as far as how to speak English, even though I spoke English all my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt very bad every day. I had to leave my classmates and go to a special room. It was called LD, Learning Disability, and everybody knew, so I was very embarrassed.
Mm-hmm.
And what that taught me, or what that gave me, was a drive to really improve my speech. And I remember I wasn't the most religious guy, but I remember going to church and seeing the preacher up there just talking and firing the crowd up. And I'm like, wow, how can he do that? Just up there in front of all these people. So I really loved public speaking, and any opportunity I got, I would really try to talk to people because I wanted to improve my speaking ability. And I'll tell you a quick thing. I worked at Steak and Shake as a waiter, and working there helped my speaking confidence because, as you know, the better you can communicate and the better you can really have a personal connection with your customers, the bigger your tip is. So
Yes.
I really learned how to get over my speaking impediments, and really connect with people. So I think that helped me tremendously. Now, very, I said before that how I gave into my challenge. I still have my lisp. I still stutter. But instead of trying to get past those, I just accepted those things. And I'll tell you, EPMD, Eric Sermon, right? Very famous. He has a lisp. And
Mm,
that, I said, wow, he's famous rapping with a lisp. So I stopped trying to change myself and started to accept myself for how I was and make things work. Because I said, look, if I can stutter, if I can have a lisp, and still get up in a room full of people and talk and be confident, man, I'm going to be awesome. So my desire for speaking and whatnot really came from there. And years later, when I went to university, and I gained a lot of confidence being African American, being black. I went to an HBCU, which is a historically black college university, and at that campus, I saw everybody black, all positions. I never saw that in Louisville. So I learned more about myself. I learned more about the black history. So I felt very confident. And that confidence led me to try things I didn't try before. I was really about sports. I went to have on a sports scholarship, wrestling. So I was that dumb jock, so to speak, because I graduated high school with a very low GPA. But during those 4 years at Howard, I pushed myself to try to be academically intelligent. And my senior year, I was senior class president for School of Business. And one of the things that the senior class president does is redo the commencement speech for School of Business. So I always say I went from being in that learning disability class to literally giving a commencement speech at my university, and I was very proud of that day. I can't find the videotape. I wish I had it, but very proud because to me that was validation,
yeah.
right? That I could do this, and it came at the commencement. Hello, the start of the next chapter in my life. So I'm graduating college on that high feeling of wow, I just did a major speech in front of everybody, right? So it really motivated me, and it kicked off my life to really continue to public speak and continue to use, as you said, use my mouth, use my words to build a career.
Wow. What a shift, what a life change
Yeah,
to, as
yeah,
you said, give into the adversity to rise. I won't even say above it, but just navigate in it in excellence. It's like, hey, these are the challenges, but that doesn't stop me. But the message that sends to those like you mentioned, Eric Sermon, it's like, oh wait, oh okay, he's like me and he's still doing it. Okay, so it's when you acknowledge that, you now give power to people who are like you to know that they have a
mhm,
voice too. And that actually is, one of the cornerstones of tenets of what we focus on within our community, the activation hour, and everyone that we serve is to activate your voice.
right,
Activate
right,
your voice. Get used to what your voice sounds like.
right.
It won't sound like anyone else. It is as unique as your DNA and your fingerprints. And if you get accustomed to what that sounds like and you become comfortable, it's calibrated for certain people. There are people, if you try to sound like someone else, then you lose your people, because there are literally people calibrated to know what your voice sounds like for your
You
message.
know, you have some very powerful words. You sound very professionally technical. It's wonderful, right? Calibrated. It is beautiful. And I'll tell you one thing, because as you being a coach yourself, one thing you know that it's really not about us whatsoever.
At all.
So the things that I went through, and let me tell you something, people are resilient. It's not just us. People are resilient. But
Mhm.
the things that I went through, and there's so many other things I went through, as you have went through things yourself, all this does is when we're coaches, and people are sharing their goals, people are sharing their challenges, what they've been through. All this does is let us know that if we can make it ourselves, the client can make it also. So we always have whatever the client wants to achieve, we always in our minds have the view of they can achieve it. They
Yeah.
might not know it yet, but they can achieve it. That's very important because when you're going to a coach or anybody for support, it's very important that they believe in you. And as
Yeah.
coaches, we've been through it ourselves, and I call it drinking your own Kool-Aid, right? You cannot, for example, I cannot coach somebody on how to improve their life unless I have improved my life also. You
Yeah.
have to have that experience. I think it's one of the best things because coaching is not about the coach. The coaching is really, really about the client and helping them get over and reach their goal.
That's we must remember that in life and in business, whether domestically or abroad, we can't forget about
Yes.
the people that we serve, the people that we're called to, the people we're assigned to, no matter where it is. There I hear so much, a lot of conferences of, you know, and even I think I posted a quote yesterday, just kind of in preparation of jazzing people up for our conversation, is a Paul McCartney quote about think local, well, think globally, act locally, and what that even means. Um, is that I believe that we're entrusted to a global voice when we're locally responsible. It's like,
Right.
okay, what are you doing with what you have right now? There's somebody who's listening to this saying, man, I wish I could see these places or that I can experience these things. Start where you are. Start where you are. I told you I just started with a mic and some Wi-Fi in a spare room in my house. And here's the irony though, Coach Colin. I was supposed to be actually on a mission trip in Uganda when the pandemic started. And yeah, right. So, and before the call, you and I have a mutual connection in Uganda, in Kampala. And so I said,
Yeah.
oh God, okay. So I was supposed to physically be there, but you would make it as such that I would touch over 20 countries, including the very place where my feet were supposed to be. And so when we talk about thinking globally, the world is much smaller than we think if we only just take action where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me say one thing really quick. You mentioned about people starting. This is not my quote, but I love this quote. It goes, "You don't have to be great to start improving your life, but you have to start to be great. You
You have
have to take that first step, right?" There's my little family in the background.
Hi, family.
You have to take that first step. I think you have it spot on. I think that the world, I found the world to be very, very small, and in
Mhm.
some cases, very, very large. I remember one time I was in Amsterdam, walking down the street, and I bumped into my college mate, and I'm like, "Wow, this is just how did this
Aren't
happen?
those experiences mind blowing?
Mind blowing.
That
How did this
happened.
happen?"
Yeah.
Yeah, but the more I think one of the benefits of living here in Shanghai is this is a very diverse city. You have people literally from all over the world, and they're very, very authentic. They're
Hmm.
very, very willing to share their culture.
Yeah.
And you mentioned being in Germany, and one thing I've learned, Germans travel a lot. They
Yeah.
travel a lot, and they're some of the most polite people. And I mean, Germans are very, very nice and polite. Which, if you think about our unconscious bias, sometimes we don't think about Germans like that. And
Right.
I was very taken aback by that. So
So was
what that, yeah, what that taught me was you have to really have an open attitude and judge people by who they are, not from where they are. And as
I.
you mentioned, I think that's really how you're thinking more global and not local. Because locally, you may have a bias about other people, but thinking global, we're all part of the global family. And I think that helped me to really open myself up and not have that bias to people. So I think again, you and your nice fancy words, man, the way you share your stories. I think that if I say as far as what I've learned most about living abroad, it's that you have to you have to take that as you say, take that start. You have to start a plan, and you have to really say, you know what, if I want to experience life differently, even a vacation, right? Life differently, plan it. Save up the money. If you have to save for a year, save up the money, find a pen pal, say a pen pal, find somebody in that culture to help you navigate those those non-tourist places, see
Yeah.
the real places, right? But you have to plan it, and you have to say to yourself, you know what? I'm going to get there no matter what. And if you're in the U.S. right now, get your passport ready. A lot of folks don't have passports,
Yes.
right? Get your passport ready.
That's what I mean by start where you are. Make the first step. Just go download the application. Do that.
Yep.
And then start connecting. I had a conversation, Colin, with a potential client who's now a client, and one of her things, she's also a speaker, and she was just apprehensive about messages she would get in her DMs, like on Instagram or whatever. And I told her, I said, believe it or not, one of the first gateways to me reaching a global audience during a pandemic, it was I posted I call it, I read this book, Radical Candor. I talk a lot about radically transparent. And I said, I just start telling on my stuff. I started telling just personal anecdotes and stories and things, and people could relate to it. And there was another fellow coach in Trinidad and Tobago who saw it. And she liked all the posts. And I inboxed her. I said, thank you. Like, you took the time to really like and engage with my post, and I appreciate that. And so we have to stop being afraid, like, oh, the internet boogie monster, or people are just weird or whatever for direct messaging. That's people are longing for connectivity right now. And you would be amazed. I mean, that's how you and I connected, was in a group of, global podcasters, and people had a story to tell. It's like, hey, I'm ready to tell my story. Can I share with you? And we can't live so afraid that we block out the connectivity and the opportunity that's awaiting us. So I think that's so important. And I think that's also a perfect bridge to what you even referenced when we talk about the unconscious bias in terms of Germans, which I did personally experience myself and in other cultures as well. Racial harmony. You mentioned just, hey, that you shifting from Louisville, Kentucky to then Washington, D.C. to Howard, and then even, your culture, the culture you experienced abroad. Let's help people out as we kind of wrap up the conversation here, because we started in a pandemic, and somehow in the midst of that, we were glued to our devices, and we began to see the civil unrest. Things that were happening the entire time, but now we can't look away. So let's talk about that.
You mentioned racial harmony, and I'll tell you, I don't know if I've ever experienced racial harmony. I've experienced racial tolerance. And what I mean by that is even here in China, we have a lot of different races and cultures living together. Same thing in the US. But sometimes I think it's more of a tolerating relationship as opposed to harmonious. And harmonious would mean it doesn't matter what your color is, you're going to get the job if you're qualified for it. It doesn't matter what your color is, you're not going to get followed when you walk into a store.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what your color is, you're not going to get extra scrutiny from the law enforcement. So I think it's more racial tolerance, racial harmony. Mm-hmm. But racial tolerance, hey man, look, it works. It works. It works. I think that, going back to your question, and I apologize because I rambled. What was the question again?
We were talking about just this. I just wanted you to talk about it. Just racial harmony. You referenced, in our pre-conversation about what that experience is of racial harmony, but you answered it. It's less harmony and more tolerance. And when I think harmony, I think in terms of things that work in concert. Like we hear things harmonious, and it sounds like, okay, well, a harmony means there's maybe a 3-part chord, and hey, there's a different tone. You're at a different level, but it works together. Which I think you have to tolerate that. But here's the thing: if someone gets off key, can you still roll with it? That's what jazz is. Jazz is like the most beautiful mistake ever. It's hey, let's make a different sound here. It's not going to always sound good. Tolerance means I don't really like what you said, and I don't know how I feel about it, but I can be honest with myself and with you, and we can still find a way to navigate this thing.
Right, and there's a very thin line, because it's interesting. During this time, 2020, I mentioned earlier, we had the physical concern, right, of COVID. Then we had the emotional baggage of what took place in the U.S. between police and certain people, and that's a very heavy burden. Yeah. What I was most, I can say, not inspired, but actually I wasn't inspired, but what I found very touching, I mean, very emotional. Here in China, a lot of people, as we've seen, there have been protests all over the world, and in a lot of cases, the protests aren't being led by people of color. Here in China, also, a lot of people reached out to me, to
Mm-hmm.
ask what is taking place to learn more about it. So, we talked about me being a life coach. I also do a lot of training, and I've gotten more corporations, entities reaching out and saying, okay, Colin, we have a team here in China, and we're made up of maybe French people, people from Europe, and we don't understand this, but we want to make sure that we're being more culturally aware.
Wow.
Talk to us about DDI, right?
Yeah.
Talk to us about diversity, discrimination, and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Train us about how to do better. And I'll tell you, we're talking about diversity, discrimination, and inclusion in the workforce, the employees, the company cares about one thing with training: how to have a competitive advantage over other companies. How
Yes.
how our marketing, how our promotions, how can we make sure we don't make a mistake, right? But individuals, they want to know how can being more culturally aware, how can
Mm-hmm.
that help me get an edge and be valuable in the marketplace? So by doing more training on these topics and coaching, because some people want to understand how can they repair relationships when they were insensitive a few months ago with certain comments. I think through that, it's taught me, not really taught me, but it made me very, very encouraged because there are not a lot of people of color here in China. So to see that organizations, global companies, are really trying to make their employees more aware and trying to be more aware as an organization, that really helped me realize that this is not just a black thing. This is
Yes.
a global thing. And
Yeah.
I got to say, I never imagined that would happen. And again, going back to one thing you mentioned, it's really taking people for who they are, not from their background. And I think growing up as an African American in the U.S., we've always had to be more tolerant, right? So I think we're inherently more patient, and we know how to have that conversation when somebody is saying things like, well, all life matters. Okay, well, you know what? I agree, but Black Lives Matters too, right? But
Yeah.
not attacking that. So I think knowing how to have the conversation individually and to an organization, it really helps you when you think about, as you mentioned, that global to local mindset and having that global mindset locally.
That's perfect. I think that is a perfect way if we had to cap off this conversation about um, life abroad. And life abroad is really a state of mind. It's a
Yeah,
state
yes,
of mind.
yes, it is. And let me add one thing because I want to just
Sure.
give your audience a message, something I believe in. I believe that you have one life. I think you have one life, but try to do everything you can to live a life by design as opposed to living a life by chance. What that means is a lot of people have succeeded. A lot of people have very happy lives. A lot of people are struggling, and sometimes they live a life just by what takes place, what life does to me. Man, life keeps hitting me with A, B, and C. Forget that. Live a life by design. Map out how you want to live. Again, find your passion. If you have no passion, find out what you like doing. Find out where your talent is, or find out what you want to do, and then design a plan to do that. That's what coaching helps you do. Live a life by design. Let me tell you something. The life I'm living now, I thought about living this life years ago. It took me 20 years to be able to do it, but I'm doing it now. And I can tell you one thing: when I'm on my deathbed, and I say, "Man, did I succeed?" It doesn't matter if I succeeded or not. What matters is I tried. And because I tried, I know that I am successful. So live a life of design. Don't just live a life by what life gives you. Make sure you understand where you want to go and make that first step. And once you make the first step, you can make the second step. But you're never going to succeed if you don't make that first step.
Huh. Thank you. What a way to unlearn what we think about living beyond borders. So much good information and great conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed my
Yeah.
time unlearning with you today. And I hope our audience has too. Listen, if you guys enjoyed this episode, don't be selfish. Share it with someone else. Make sure you subscribe, click the button if you're watching with us with on YouTube on the replay, but also on all podcast platforms. Finally, Coach Collins, share with us, tell us about your company and how our audience can get in touch with you or work with you from where you
Right.
are now.
So let me first share you my website, oligye.com, oligye.com. And from there, you can find my Facebook, you can find my LinkedIn, you can find a lot of content about what I do. Now, as Melissa mentioned, I do have a life coaching and training business. I also have a blockchain AI themed educational platform. So all the information is on my website, and I can tell you, I consider myself to be a IT nerd. So blockchain and blockchain technologies is really something I love talking about. I think it's a disruptive technology. It's really changing the way organizations do business in several areas. So again, so two things. You have my Oligay business consulting, which is my life coaching and my training side. And guys, if you really want to improve your life, if you really want to be inspired, motivated, and have that inspiration and motivation lead you to start improving your life, and the coaching help you maintain the motivation, help you go from where you want to be to where from where you are to where you want to be. And more importantly, again, I say this a lot, when you improve your life, it's contagious,
Yes.
right? Your family's life improves. Your friends say, hey man, last year you were in a different place. Now you are so much better. What happened? And now you have a story to tell them. So now you're inspiring somebody else, right? So
Mhm.
again, if you want to be inspired, if you want to really improve your life, reach out to me on my website. We'll set up some time, have a conversation, right? Guys, take an hour. Let's have a conversation. If you want to improve your life, invest 1 hour. This is a free hour, right? So again, if you don't take that first step, I guarantee you won't take the second step. Now, on my other side, we have the blockchain business. This is part of our exchange online education platform where we do three things. We give people assessments to take. And Melissa, as you know, coming out of COVID or in COVID, a lot of people have lost jobs.
Yes.
A lot of people have lost jobs. Now, the job market is going to open back up. But imagine a starting line. You're in a race.
Hmm.
Once that gun goes off, everybody and their mother and their mother's mother is going after jobs. I got
Yeah.
to tell you, a lot of people are going after the same exact job that you want to go after. So
Mhm.
you have to do things right now to improve your skills. And our assessments allow you to identify what your strong points are, hard skills, soft skills, and where the gap is. You now have time to do what? Take online training to bridge
Mhm.
that gap. So you take our assessments. From the
Mhm.
assessments, you then have a listing of what training will help you bridge that gap. So you have assessments, you have training, and you have coaching on our site also. So this really helps you to do what? To build yourself up, build up your skills, to make sure when a gun goes off and people are running after those jobs, you have two things. One, you're already skilled up, and you have the qualifications to meet that job. So guys, reach out to me again, oligye.com. I'm Colin Thompson, and I look forward to hearing from you and having a nice conversation and helping you to reach your goals because I want to be a part of your success story. Thank you, Melissa, for having me.
Oh wow. Guys, you've heard the challenge to invest an hour, a free hour. I can't think of just a better way to give back to yourself. I love how you said it here. You invested more in your job or in your life, and here's an opportunity to up level your life, to activate your dreams here, and to really get going on that. All of the links that Coach Colin referenced will be in our show notes on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Make sure you click the link, engage with Coach Colin, and make sure you book that free session. Also, leave us a review. We want to make sure we stay at top of mind for the content we're offering here in season 2, the activation hour in the season of unlearning. Leave a review. Tell us what you think. Share it with a friend and subscribe. Turn on the notification. You don't want to miss a beat. Guys, you've been tuned in with the activation hour. I'm your girl, Melissa D, Coach Mel, and I'll be seeing you on the next episode. Thanks so much, family. Thank you, Coach Colin. You stay safe over in Shanghai, and we'll be connecting again soon. Take
All
care,
right.
guys.